The wagon had been overturned for hours when William Hart found it, its contents scattered across the muddy trail like broken dreams under the merciless Montana sun. The bodies of 2 men lay sprawled in the dust, their blood already dried to dark stains on the earth, their faces twisted in the final agony of violent death. Bandits had done this work. William could tell from the way the goods had been rifled through, the valuable items taken, and the worthless ones left to rot in the wilderness. William dismounted from his horse slowly, his weathered hands steady despite the grim scene before him. At 45, he had seen enough death to know that there was nothing he could do for these men now, except perhaps give them a decent burial. His own farm lay just 5 miles down the trail, and he had come this way looking for stray cattle, not expecting to find evidence of the violence that plagued the frontier like a festering wound. He was about to turn away when something caught his eye, half buried beneath the overturned wagon. A piece of carved stone, no bigger than his fist, but intricate beyond anything he had ever seen. The surface was covered with symbols that seemed to shift and flow in the changing light, and despite the heat of the day, the stone felt cool to the touch when he picked it up. William had lived among the Crow for a season in his younger days, learning their ways while working as a fur trapper, and he recognized the craftsmanship immediately. This was no ordinary carving. The symbols were sacred, the kind that appeared only on objects of deep spiritual significance. The weight of it in his hands felt like more than mere stone, as if the thing carried within it the prayers and hopes of generations. He was still studying the relic when he heard the sound of approaching horses. William quickly slipped the stone into his saddlebag and reached for his rifle, not knowing whether the riders would be friend or foe. 3 men appeared over the rise, their faces hard with the kind of desperation that came from empty pockets and empty stomachs. "Well, well," said the leader, a thin man with dead eyes and a scar across his left cheek. "Looks like we missed one of the merchants." William kept his rifle ready but didn't raise it. "I'm no merchant, just a farmer heading home." "Farmer, eh?" The scarred man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What's a dirt grubber doing with a rifle that fine? And that horse looks too good for plowing." "A man needs to protect what's his," William replied evenly. "Same as you, I'd imagine." The tension stretched between them like a wire about to snap. William could see the calculation in the leader's eyes, weighing the odds, deciding whether one farmer was worth the risk of a gunfight. Around them, the wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying with it the scent of rain that might never come. "Tell you what, farmer," the scarred man said finally. "You hand over that rifle and anything else of value you might be carrying, and we'll let you walk home. Fair trade for your life." William felt the weight of the stone in his saddlebag, understanding instinctively that these were the men who had killed the merchants, who had scattered sacred objects across the ground like trash. The thought of them getting their hands on something so precious made his blood run cold. "I don't think so," William said quietly. The fight that followed was brief, but decisive. William had been a soldier before he became a farmer, had learned to shoot in the kind of school where graduation meant staying alive. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the bandits lay dead, and the 3rd was riding hard toward the horizon, clutching a wounded arm and thanking whatever gods protected outlaws that he had escaped with his life. William stood over the bodies, feeling the familiar weight of violence, the way it settled into a man's bones and changed him forever. He had killed before, would probably kill again, but he took no pleasure in it. Death was simply another crop that seemed to grow too easily in the soil of the frontier. That evening, as William sat in his modest cabin, eating a supper of beans and cornbread, he took out the stone and studied it more carefully. The symbols seemed to tell a story, though he couldn't read the language they were written in. There were images of buffalo and eagles, of mountains and rivers, of figures that might have been men or might have been spirits. At the center of it all was a pattern that reminded him of the medicine wheels he had seen in Crow territory, circular and eternal, connecting all things in an endless dance of life and death and rebirth. William had been struggling with his farm for 3 years now, ever since the drought had begun. His crops withered in the fields, his cattle died of thirst, and the bank in town was making noises about foreclosure. He had tried everything he knew, but the land seemed cursed, as if the very earth had forgotten how to nurture life. Now, holding this sacred object, William felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a drowning man, but the quiet certainty that comes from touching something greater than oneself. He didn't know what the stone meant, but he knew it was important, knew that it belonged with people who could understand its power. The next morning, William rode out to find the crow. He had heard they were camped about 20 miles north, in the valley where the Medicine Creek met the Yellowstone. It was a journey that would take him away from his farm for at least 2 days, time he couldn't afford to lose with harvest season approaching. But something deep in his gut told him this was more important than any crop he might raise. The crow camp was exactly where he expected to find it, a collection of teepees arranged in a circle beside the clear waters of the creek. William approached slowly, his hands visible and empty, following the protocols he remembered from his younger days. Warriors emerged from the camp to meet him, their faces grave with the wariness that had become second nature to all Indians in this time of broken treaties and empty promises. The chief who came forward was a man William recognized, though they had never been formally introduced. Standing Bear was known throughout the territory as a leader of wisdom and strength, a man who had fought the white settlers when fighting was necessary, but who sought peace when peace was possible. "William Hart," Standing Bear said, his English precise despite the accent. "I remember you from the trading posts. You are the one who lived among our people for a season." "I am honored that you remember me," William replied, dismounting and approaching on foot. "I have come because I found something that belongs to you." Standing Bear's expression didn't change, but William could see interest flicker in his dark eyes. "What is it you have found?" William reached into his saddlebag and withdrew the stone, holding it out for the chief to see. The reaction was immediate and profound. Standing Bear's eyes widened, and he stepped back as if he had been struck. Around them, the other warriors began to murmur in their own language, voices filled with awe and disbelief. "Where did you find this?" Standing Bear asked, his voice barely above a whisper. William told him about the overturned wagon, about the dead merchants and the bandits who had scattered the contents like refuse. He told him about the fight, about the men he had killed to protect what he now understood was infinitely precious. Standing Bear took the stone with hands that trembled slightly, cradling it as if it were alive. "This is the heart of the people," he said. "It has been in our tribe for 7 generations, passed down from father to son, from medicine man to medicine man. It was stolen from us 2 moons ago, when our holy man was murdered by white men who wanted to sell it to collectors back east." "I didn't know," William said. "I just knew it was important." Important. Standing Bear looked up at him with an expression William couldn't quite read. "This stone is the center of our spiritual world. It contains the prayers of our ancestors, the hopes of our children, the very essence of what makes us who we are. Without it, we are like a body without a heart, a tree without roots." Standing Bear called out in Crow, and an old woman emerged from one of the teepees. She was ancient, her face lined with the geography of a long life, but her eyes were sharp as flint. She approached the stone with reverence, touching it gently while speaking in low, musical tones. "My grandmother says the stone has been, how do you say, blessed by your touch," Standing Bear translated. "She says it has been protected by one who understands its sacred nature, even if he cannot read its meaning." The old woman spoke again, her voice taking on the cadence of prophecy. Standing Bear listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each word. "What does she say?" William asked. "She says that the spirits have guided you to us, that this is not chance but destiny." She says that the one who returned the heart of the people must be rewarded, but that the reward must match the sacredness of the deed. William felt uncomfortable with the talk of rewards. "I don't want anything. I just wanted to return what was rightfully yours." "That is exactly why you must be rewarded," Standing Bear said. "A man who expects nothing deserves everything." The ceremony that followed, was unlike anything William had ever witnessed. The entire tribe gathered as the medicine man, a younger man who had taken over after his predecessor's murder, performed rituals that seemed to awaken the very air around them. The stone was placed in the center of a circle of eagle feathers, and the people danced around it, their voices rising in songs that seemed to come from the earth itself. William stood at the edge of the circle, feeling like an intruder in something too sacred for his understanding. But when the old woman approached him, taking his hand and leading him into the circle, he felt the barriers between worlds begin to dissolve. She spoke to him in Crow, her voice gentle but insistent. When he looked confused, Standing Bear translated. "She says you are now part of the circle, part of the sacred dance. The stone has accepted you, and through it, so have we. You are no longer merely a white farmer. You are a keeper of the sacred, a bridge between worlds." The dancing continued until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that seemed to echo the colors in the stone. When it was over, Standing Bear approached William with a small leather pouch. "This is soil from the sacred places," he said. "Mix it with the earth of your farm, and the spirits will know that your land is under our protection." William accepted the pouch, feeling its weight like a promise. "I don't understand." "You will," Standing Bear said. "Tonight, when the moon is full, come to your fields. Bring this soil and a heart full of hope. The spirits will do the rest." William rode home in the darkness, his mind spinning with everything he had witnessed. Part of him wanted to dismiss it all as superstition, but another part, the part that had lived among the Crow and learned to respect their ways, knew that he had been touched by something beyond his understanding. His farm looked different in the moonlight, as if the silver radiance had transformed the familiar landscape into something magical. The fields that had been barren and cracked just that morning now seemed to shimmer with possibility. William walked to the center of his largest field, carrying the pouch of sacred soil, and knelt in the dirt. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, had no script for this moment, so he simply opened the pouch and began to scatter the soil, letting it fall through his fingers like dark snow. As he worked, he found himself thinking about the stone, about the sacred symbols that told the story of a people's connection to the land. It was then that he heard them coming. The sound started as a whisper, like wind through grass, but gradually grew into something more complex. Voices singing in harmony, the soft rhythm of many feet moving in unison. William looked up to see them emerging from the darkness, dozens of Crow warriors and women and children, all moving in a slow, ceremonial procession toward his fields. At their head walked Standing Bear, carrying the heart of the people. Beside him was the old woman, her voice leading the song that seemed to make the very air vibrate with power. Behind them came the rest of the tribe, their faces painted with sacred designs, their movements following patterns that were older than memory. They entered William's fields like a river of living prayer, spreading out across the barren earth in precise formations. The old woman began to speak, her voice carrying despite its age, and William realized she was performing some kind of blessing, calling upon the spirits to bring life to the dead soil. Standing Bear approached William, holding out the stone. "Touch it," he said. "Let the spirits know that you accept their gift." William placed his hand on the carved surface, feeling again that strange coolness, that sense of touching something eternal. The moment his skin made contact with the stone, the singing around them intensified, and William felt something shift in the very ground beneath his feet. "What's happening?" he whispered. "The spirits are awakening your land," Standing Bear replied. "They are calling the rain, blessing the soil, ensuring that your crops will grow strong and healthy. This is the reward for returning the heart of the people. Beditu. The ceremony continued through the night, with the crow moving through William's fields in complex patterns, their voices rising and falling in harmonies that seemed to resonate with the earth itself. William found himself caught up in the rhythm, his own voice joining the ancient songs despite not understanding the words. When dawn broke over the horizon, the crow were gone, vanished as silently as they had appeared. William stood alone in his fields, wondering if it had all been some kind of dream brought on by exhaustion and hope. But then he looked down at his hands and saw that they were still stained with the sacred soil, and he knew that something real had happened, something that would change everything. The rains came that afternoon, the first real precipitation the area had seen in 3 years. William watched from his porch as the clouds gathered and darkened, feeling a mixture of wonder and disbelief as the water began to fall. It wasn't a violent storm, but a gentle, steady rain that soaked into the earth like a blessing. Over the following days, William watched in amazement as his fields began to transform. Seeds that had been dormant for months suddenly sprouted, sending up green shoots that seemed to grow visibly, hour by hour. The corn that had been struggling in the drought suddenly stood tall and strong, its leaves a vibrant green that almost hurt to look at. But it wasn't just his crops that were changing. The very land itself seemed different, more alive somehow. Wildlife returned to areas where it had been absent for years. The creek that ran through his property, dry for 2 seasons, began to flow again. Even the air seemed different, cleaner, and more vital. Word of the transformation spread quickly through the territory. Other farmers came to see the miracle for themselves, unable to believe that land that had been barren and lifeless could become so productive seemingly overnight. Some attributed it to luck, others to superior farming techniques. But William knew the truth. The sacred stone had saved his farm, but more than that, it had saved his faith. He had been on the verge of giving up, of abandoning the land that had been in his family for generations. Now, watching his fields wave in the breeze like a green sea, he understood that he had been given a second chance, not just at farming, but at life itself. Standing Bear visited him a week later, arriving alone in the early morning when the dew still clung to the grass like diamonds. The chief walked through the fields with the appreciation of someone who understood the miracle they represented. "The spirits are pleased," he said as they stood at the edge of the cornfield. "They have accepted your offering and blessed your land in return." "I don't know how to thank you," William said, "or your people. What you've done." "We have done nothing," Standing Bear replied. "We have simply acknowledged what was already true. You returned the heart of the people when you could have sold it, could have kept it, could have let it disappear forever. Such an act creates ripples that spread far beyond what the eye can see." "What happens now?" Standing Bear smiled, the first time William had seen him do so. "Now you live. You tend your land, raise your crops, be a good neighbor to all people, white and Indian alike. And you remember that the earth is sacred, that all life is connected, that what we do to the land we do to ourselves." William nodded, understanding that this was about more than just farming. He had been given a glimpse into a way of seeing the world that was deeper and more meaningful than anything he had known before. The crow had shared their spiritual wealth with him, and in return, he would share his material wealth with them. Over the years that followed, William's farm became a place of pilgrimage for both whites and Indians. He established a tradition of sharing his harvest with the crow, ensuring that a portion of his crops always made their way to the reservation. More importantly, he became a bridge between the two worlds, helping to translate not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. The sacred stone remained with the crow, as it should have, but William kept the memory of touching it, of feeling the connection to something greater than himself. He married eventually, a schoolteacher named Sarah, who understood his respect for the Indian ways. and who helped him teach their children to see the world through eyes that recognized the sacred in the everyday. When visitors came to see the famous fertile farm, William would tell them the story of the overturned wagon, of the bandits and the sacred stone, of the night when the crow came to bless his fields. Some believed him, others dismissed it as frontier folklore, but William didn't care. He knew what he had experienced, knew that he had been touched by something holy. The land continued to prosper, season after season, year after year. Even during droughts that devastated neighboring farms, William's fields remained green and productive. The creek never ran dry again, the soil never lost its richness, and the crops never failed. It was as if the very earth had been transformed at the molecular level, infused with a life force that transcended normal agricultural understanding. But perhaps the most important change was in William himself. The man who had rescued the sacred relic was not the same as the man who had been blessed by its power. He had learned that true wealth came not from what you could take from the land, but from what you could give back to it. He had discovered that the boundaries between peoples were artificial constructs, but the connections between all living things were real and eternal. When William died at the age of 73, the crow came to his funeral. Standing Bear, now an old man himself, spoke words over the grave that mixed English with crow, Christian prayers with ancient blessings. The heart of the people was brought out for the ceremony, its carved surface still cool to the touch, still humming with the power of generations. He was a keeper of the sacred, Standing Bear said as they lowered the coffin into the ground. He understood that some things are more important than money, more valuable than gold. He gave us back our heart, and we gave him our blessing. Both gifts were freely given, both were freely received. The farm continued to prosper under Sarah's management, then under their children's care, then under their grandchildren's stewardship. The story of the sacred stone became family legend, passed down through generations along with the land itself. Each new generation was taught to respect the earth, to honor the connection with the crow, to remember that they were not just farmers, but guardians of something sacred. And on quiet nights, when the moon was full and the wind whispered through the corn, those who knew how to listen could still hear the echo of ancient songs, the voices of the crow calling blessings down upon the land that had been touched by the sacred and would never be the same again. The sacred relic had been rescued from thieves and murderers, returned to its rightful place among the people who understood its power. In return, the tribe had blessed the fields of the man who had chosen to do what was right rather than what was profitable. It was a transaction that transcended economics, an exchange that proved the power of respect, honor, and the recognition that all life was connected in ways that human understanding could barely grasp. William Hart had rescued a sacred relic. By night, the tribe had blessed his fields. Both acts were expressions of the same truth, that the sacred was not something distant and untouchable, but something present in every moment, waiting to be recognized by those who had eyes to see and hearts to understand. The blessing continued. Season after season, year after year, generation after generation, the land remembered, the spirits remembered, and the people remembered. And in that remembering, the sacred lived on, connecting past and future, earth and sky, all peoples in the eternal dance of life that had no beginning and would have no end.